So,
Can I say something?
yes. No.
Well, to get warmed up, can I just say something off the cuff so I'm prepared for all your questions? I'm going to stay, on subject matter.
We're going to go all over the place.
Like last night we were talking about stuff that was basically a continuum. Stuff just keeps motoring on.
Yeah.
And it brought to mind after we parted company, when I was a kid working in New York, I was repairing the box office at the Jan Hus Theater. Remember I told you about the Jan Hus? And I had to buy some things and all that kind of business. And I went to the manager, Paul Libin, and that's part of Circle in the Square. And I presented him my bill. And he says to me, did you mark it up? And I looked at him. I said, no. Of course I didn't mark it up. This is it. He said, why don't we do this? Why don't you add a couple hours and that'll pay for the material. I'll keep the material chit and everything. Now, I didn't care. I said, fine, fine. Then it looked like I was slow, and all this other business. But it brought to mind when I was a kid, and I was working at the Schubert Theater in Detroit, Michigan. We were loading in Inherit the Wind. Peter Larkin was the set designer. Big show. And I'm just a kid, just bringing stuff off the truck. And I had a block and fall, like a big mother, 5/8 hemp, all that stuff. Throw it over my shoulder, and I'm walking across stage. And the house carpenter, an old guy, he dressed like my grandfather. Old, he was, 20 years younger than I am now, but I thought he was older in the hills. And he grabs me. He says, follow me, lad. And I follow him, and he has a key to this door. Small room, stage right behind the stage manager's station at the Schubert, full of block and fall. He says, put it there, lad. And I hang it up. All right. We go back, and we finish the load in. And then they're starting to put things together. And the road carpenter says, where the hell is my block and fall? That damn thing must still be in the truck. Go out and get it. No block and fall. Right? And I happen to be there. And I start to say that I know where it's at, Mr. Hero. Well, the house carpenter grabs me, smiling, puts a hand over my face, rather roughly, I thought. He says to the show carpenter, to the road carpenter, he says, were you in Cleveland, sir? Well, yes, that was because you always played Cleveland first. He said, the Hannah, you were at the Hannah. Thieves, Thieves at the Hannah. They have it, sir. Let me look and see if I may have something that would work for you. And so he takes me. We go back to the little room, and we go. And, of course, even by then I knew we couldn't bring the same one back. And he looks around and finds something that's kind of close, brings it out to the guy, and they exchange, I think back in those days, $40.
Big money.
And that day with Paul Libin, I knew that $40 chit, when the house carpenter, the show carpenter, gave it to the company manager, it became 50. When the company manager gave it to the general manager, it became 60. When the general manager gave it to the show producer, it probably became 100. Back in the 50s, you're talking real money here. And I said, nothing changes. Did you mark it up, he says to me. What am I, your greengrocer? No, I didn't mark the goddamn thing up. Here's the bill.
And now, when somebody says mark it up, you know.
Hand me your glasses, Joe.
First things first, tell us who you are and tell us what you do.
It's a very personal question, Douglas.
That's why we're here. We want to be
Joe Paccitti, and I've been a technical director. Started out in business as a carpenter, technical director, production supervisor, production manager, whatever you want to call it. And then many times just an all-around handyman for whatever anybody wanted in the theater. And sometimes a few things outside of the theater.
Tell us, what does a technical director do? I don't know anything about theater. Try to explain to me what a technical director
Well, back in, and I'm pretty sure it's quite a bit the same as it is, as it was then. You were in charge of getting the physical production up in the theater. And mostly that term is in the opera world or in regional theater. Back in those days, professional, let's say, touring shows and Broadway shows had a master carpenter, and that's the kind of role you filled. But as a technical director, you had a quasi-knowledge, or it helped, of electrics, and in many cases, plumbing, in case something was wrong in the theater, to be able to rehang a door to the producer's office and, put up new mirrors. But mostly, you were in charge of building the show and making sure that it got painted. You very seldom were you a painter, but you were a carpenter, did a certain amount of upholstery work, and back in the day also the flats were covered in fabric as opposed to luan or any other material. And you would also have to be fairly quick-witted to be able to come up with new ways to do things. Working in plastic, vacuum forming later on, fiberglass, and that sort of business. But generally, you were in charge of the physical production. You were given a set of drawings. You put together a budget. You tried to be as close as you could to delivering the show on budget. And working also extremely close with the designer, because generally, what he designed is what had to be up on stage. And you get at least in my case, you get a very kind of way of working with a designer to give them hopefully more than they were expecting. I mean, and granted that a little bit of that is ego-driven. You want to, you could really make it look better than he drew it.
What is the first impression or the first time you stepped onto a stage? How did you feel?
Well, that's tough to say because I always wanted to be in the theater. Even when I was a kid, I never thought I would do it. Matter of fact, in high school, I joined the National Guard because then I was going to join the Army just to get the hell out of town. And I had thought, well, I'd spent 20 years in the Army. I'd be 37 because I joined the Guard early, and then I'd go off and do what I wanted to do. But things change, and started doing semi-professional theater back home and meeting all these wonderful actors. I'm still stage struck, probably always will be. I'd love to get back and do it again. It's one of my first theaters that I worked at, a real theater, was the Sun Parlor Playhouse in Leamington, Ontario. And it was just wonderful to build the set with, the people who knew more than I did at the time. And we all lived in one big house on the beach. I loved it.
Tell me about the people that you work with. How do they make a difference in what you do?
Well, I think at the end of the day is that they were good, or maybe, like they were good at what they did, but most of it, they were committed to what they were doing. Not all of them were great actors or great anything, but they were really good people and very committed to what they were doing, believed what they were doing had value. Now, and it's not to say, that you don't find that in any other walk of life. My dad placed and finished concrete, and he did it beautifully. He was very, very committed to doing it. But that, people who are really, how to put it, they just do what they do. There is no mystery to it. There may be mystery to the audience, but their commitment to what they were doing really, really got me going.
Tell me what your favorite part is of what you do.
Well, it's going to be hard to pick something that's favorite, okay? But if you're going to press me, what is really enjoyable to me, favorite, would have to be when it's finished and it goes up, and everything works exactly as everybody thought it was going to work, and everybody was afraid it wasn't going to work, and it works just fine, and the audience is having a hell of a time, or most of them. You know, when it's done, the process, yes, that's very, very enjoyable. But when it's finished and the curtain goes up and you're standing in the back of the house and everybody goes ooh and ah or whatever.
How do you feel at when it's a half an hour, the audience is coming in, the show's up, you're at the back of the house or you're backstage. What are you feeling at that particular moment?
Well, what I would really be feeling, if I can remember correctly, is just feeling that, making sure even at that late date that everybody, I would spend a lot of time checking the light booth, checking the stage manager, going through the dressing area, going through backstage. I may at some point have given the appearance of being, but now you're really still looking, just to make sure.
Tell me, if you can, what is it when an audience is watching a play or a show? What is it about what we do that contributes to the show, but the audience never knows about?
Contributing to the show and if you say without knowledge of the audience.
Well, they don't. I guess what it is that when an audience goes in to see a show, they don't realize all of the other people that are involved. Is always a mystery to them. It's part of what.
Well, let me ask you: should it remain a mystery to them?
It's the magic.
Now,
what's your definition of the magic?
Well, my definition of that particular magic would be that moment between the audience and the actor. Because without the audience, without the actor, most important, without the audience, it ain't a show, it's rehearsal. And then when you get that moment where the audience is, keyed into what the actor is saying, doing, or the actors. Now, I spent a fair amount of time lighting shows. So when you're doing that, you have to sit through many rehearsals. And sometimes when you do your fourth production of, say, Glass Menagerie, you really begin to hear what these words mean. And then you really begin to feel, how a different audience takes what is being said. Because it's the same line. Mrs. Gibbs says, good morning. And it's the fourth time you've heard it, the fourth actress you've heard say it. But it is different each and every time. Good morning. Or come out and smell my heliotrope, And I used to make obscene jokes about that line. But
tell me what it's like working with the crew during the show. Tell me during the show when something goes wrong, what happens?
Well, in my case, something going wrong would really be if someone wasn't in their position. The scenery's done, everything's finished, maybe somebody ripped a hem on a costume or that sort of stuff, and, someone then has to step in and fix that. It would be difficult to try and say what would, if something goes wrong. Again, I'll go back to the only thing that would go wrong if a piece of scenery got hung up, if you had a moving show. Then you just have to get after it with the right people and fix it. And it's, it would be, I guess, kind of like fixing a racing car during the race.
When you were first starting, did you have anyone that you looked up to or anyone that was a mentor to you?
Yeah, a mentor to me would have been many people as I progressed. When I was a kid, I think I was just out of high school or maybe still in high school. I was working at a summer theater, Kent Theater, and I met a wonderful designer and we're still friends. We're talking about 50 years later. I haven't talked to him in a while. I speak to his ex-wife every now and then, and he was a wonderful designer. And some of the things he taught me about painting I still remember. An actor friend of mine, Lenny Orr, he and I, he kind of really got me out of town. And matter of fact, we came from Detroit, Michigan, and went to San Francisco to start a theater in an old defunct market on, what was I said, Grant and Green. Or, we pulled theater seats out of Vallejo, some old movie house in Vallejo, California. There was no theater, no money, and we went to Cincinnati. People like that were mentors to me, and they were just, and it happened quite often. When you get to another plateau, there's a mentor for that plateau. Then eventually you get to a place. I remember I was talking with Bill Stewart, who was company manager, general manager of the Williamstown Playhouse. We first met in Cincinnati, and we were talking about it. At some point you get to, there's no up anymore. It's all horizontal moves,
How do you feel when you're backstage compared to, say, walking down the street? Does it feel comfortable to you? Is it home?
It's always comfortable. Backstage is always comfortable to me, whether it's showtime or even just in an empty theater. It is extremely comfortable. I love to look around, and if I'm in an old theater, I can point and just, almost give you the history of the damn place, because of the way they evolved, the older theaters. Their architecture tells you stories.
Do you think what you do you love what you do?
Do I love what I do? I'm not too sure about answering it that way. I love a few people and a couple of children and the cats I have, and that's about the extent of my love. Now,
Do you enjoy what you do?
I enjoy and like what I do a great deal, and I think what I do has a certain value, as I do other work, that people do. It's what I do. I find, or has a certain value to the society at large. I really do believe that, and that's all I can say.
Okay, so let's go back to trying to explain what it is you do. When you were growing up and when you'd get together at holidays and the family would say, "So, Joe, what are you up to these days?" Did they ever understand what it was that you did?
Probably not. I'm not sure that they understood or really cared. They cared that I was working, that I was getting a paycheck, that I wasn't wiring home for money. They were, and I was happy. And I think that was very, very important to them. Now, and you have to understand that I'm the son and grandson of immigrants, and you got a job, you're doing well,
Right.
you like what you're doing,
It's all good.
and that's good. Mazel tov.
It's all good. Okay, we're going to look at the resume here because this is amazing. Tell me about the Winter Olympics in Lake Placid. How was that for you? What was the experience like to be part of an event as large as this?
Well, when I did the Winter Olympics in Lake Placid, that was 1980. Very small compared to what you see now. Extremely small. Very, very homegrown. The people at Lake Placid did not want a big event. One of the leaders of the group that brought it there, he was a Reverend Fells, who was the ex-sheriff. And at one point they said, well, we could have the military be security and that kind of stuff back in just general policing. And he was very adamant and said, no, there'll be no soldiers here. It's a sporting event. And that was kind of,
And what was your role?
well, I was called the director of technical production. I did the interface for all the technical stuff. And it's quite complicated. And what people don't understand that to have an Olympic, summer or winter, you also have to have a religious symposium. And it has to go on for the entire length of the Olympics, so that there's, every religious person on the planet, they have this big powwow, literally. There's a huge art event, has to be. Matter of fact, Falabalist dance was the big dance thing, and they danced all over town. They had no stage; they just danced on the in the streets, in the snow, whatever. Then the actual games you don't really see because it goes all over the place. And the one thing that was different at Lake Placid, we had all the award ceremony in one place. Ordinarily, they would have them at each different venue. And here, and this was the idea of Tommy Walker, an Englishman, and now, well, he's passed, but he was the director for television for everything. And that was his idea. We had fireworks, and we played the anthem and all that sort of stuff. And, of course, I was there in the arena when the American team won.
How did you feel when that happened?
Well, you really do feel good, The American team won. I was in the basement preparing for the next award ceremony, and the place went wild. You thought the damn building was going to come down.
But you're so busy with everything else that's going on, you probably don't have as much time as somebody else would to really appreciate.
Well, I think you end up having the same kind of appreciation, and you just have to contain it a bit. And I must tell you, after being down in the locker room area of the ice arena and seeing the teams from the other countries, and I'm looking at these guys, and they all look like assassins, I got to tell you. I mean, and I'm looking at our guys who are pimply-faced youth, for Christ's sakes, and I said, they're going to get murdered. Murdered. Not so.
Meanwhile, they win. Tell me about your time at Juilliard. What was that like?
Well, that was my time at Juilliard. You could say that it was a high point because it was Juilliard, Lincoln Center, and all that. But the reason why it was a high point is because of the people. And my plan was not to stay there. I was TD at the Playhouse in the Park in Cincinnati, and Doug Schmidt, the designer, said, they're looking for a TD at the Juilliard School. Why don't you apply? I said, okay. I did, and I went and interviewed, and I think they only hired me because I was willing to take less money than anybody else. I never planned to stay. They were going to move me, my wife, my daughter, and our golden retriever out, set me up for maybe, I think, pay a month's rent. I said, fine, I'll work there for 1 year. I got the summer off, and I won't come back after Labor Day.
And then,
I was there for 9 years. And that's because of the people I met. John Houseman, the people in the music school, Martha Hill, who ran the dance department, people that nobody know about. George Balanchine, the School of American Ballet, their school is in the Juilliard building. And then all these young people, were just Kelsey Grammer, Kevin Kline, Patti LuPone, David Stiers, Val Kilmer, Robin Williams. He didn't finish. He stayed there 2 years. Christopher Reeve.
but how did you, coming from Cincinnati, and now you're at Juilliard, did you know when you were there what this place meant to actors, what this place meant to the performing arts?
No, I don't think so, because I didn't, you ask what it meant. See, at the end of the day, it meant a place that I liked to be at. And I was never awed by it. Never, ever awed by it. And yes, I'm starstruck and all that other stuff, but not awed by anybody. I was doing my job, they were doing their job. And sometimes I would take the attitude, if only they were as good at their job as I was at my job, this would be a whole lot better. But I just loved it. Did I understand the importance of it? Yes. You know,
How did it make you feel to go to work when you were there? Again, it was just a job for you, but
well, how did I feel? Okay, yes, it was a job, which is very important. But it was a job I really enjoyed going to. You know, I would get there at 8 o'clock in the morning, because that's when the carpenters got there. Now, I didn't need to be there at 8 in the morning, but I got there at 8 in the morning. I was there till the last show closed. Then went out to the bar with the guys. So, no, I wouldn't have given it up for the world. You know, not a chance.
I'm happy.
what's
Do
that?
we have to be out of here at 3, or we have to stop shooting at 3?
Well, I think we
Let's
could
keep
probably-
doing it.
Let's just keep going.
We're good, and we're on.
And we're on?
Yep.
Okay. Tell me about Gene Rosenthal. How is that like to work with somebody that I and a lot of other people think of as a legend?
Gene Rosenthal. Now, I didn't work that closely with her. I met her, we would talk, and she knew who I was enough to say hello when we crossed and that kind of stuff. I did some work for her company, and there was always people interfacing. Now, she would come by and say, well, that's very good. And I was just being a draftsman for them and not AutoCAD, pencil and paper. As a matter of fact, we were doing a big, the arts complex at the big university in Texas, there at Austin. Is that the University of Texas or whatever?
I think so, yeah.
And because if I may digress, we were having a meeting. I just happened to be there, and the Opera House was, I think, as large or larger than the Met. And they were having a hard time shoehorning all these people into this space. And I just asked what I thought was an obvious question: why does the Opera House have to be so big? And this Texan, I think, was underwriting it, and he said, "'Cause I want to." That was the last meeting I was asked to. I mean, I was asked for input, but I never went where the client went.
Tell me about this quote from John Houseman. It's necessary to repeat that without Joe Paccitti, there might have been no acting company. Not only was he a man of inexhaustible energy and resource, he was also a lunatic who was willing to understand and execute tasks on which no man in his right mind would have ventured.
Well,
Tell me about John Houseman.
John Houseman, he was quite simply somebody that I actually loved. And I think what he meant by all that is that myself personally and whoever else I could corral with me, it would be like the Marines. We just take the beachhead. There's no quarter given, no quarter asked. We're going to open it, and let's just do it. And you always find a way. And did I bend the rules? And he knew that, and he absolutely loved it about me. Sometimes I'd bend the rules so far backwards it was looking up its own arse. But you got it done. And I always felt he was a good cause. And that makes it sound like I felt he was a lost cause, but he wasn't. And that's I think how he got as far as he did. That people just said, that this is a worthy man. And so whatever he touches has got to be worthwhile doing.
So Jules Fisher, same to same, on a different plane?
Well, he was different. Jules Fisher, wonderful guy. He really, truly was. Inventive. I think a very good lighting designer. But he also always had a master plan, where I don't think Jeannie Rosenthal did, or Johnny Gleason. I'm not, but I think Jules had like a 5-year plan, then another 5-year plan, which is good. Now that I'm 70, I wish the hell I had a 5-year plan somewhere.
What's your I'm looking for 2 stories here, and whatever floats into your mind is what I'll take. What's your favorite memory of the business? What's your least favorite memory of the business?
What's my favorite memory of the business?
Yeah, if you could take, if somebody said you've got one walk away from the business.
Well, let's go back to John Houseman and the acting company. I would love to, with other people, try to find that moment, because there was a moment, and it was what they call Group 1, the first graduating class, that everybody knew that this was a living thing. But no one said it. We all knew it at different times. And it'd be great just to go back to that week or month or 24 hours when everybody said, oh, this works. This absolutely works. My worst time is when it was an opera, Don Pasquale. Huge opera. Ordinarily, an opera company does it because it's a little pisser, and you just do it. We had Giancarlo Menotti was the director. Wonderful designer, Pierluigi Samritani. He's gone now. We used to call him La Mosca, the fly. He was dressed in black. He had black curly hair, black beard, little guy. Looked like a fly. Wonderful designer, flaming pain in the ass. I mean, he was just, and we tried to give him everything he wanted. I was even in the opera. I played a priest. There was a funeral procession that came through. There's no funeral procession in the original opera. We had all kinds of things. And when it was all over, and I liked Pierluigi, and he came to me. He said, Signor Paccitti, you're a wonderful man, but you suffer from one sin. And I said, "Che cosa? What's that?" He says, "You suffer from the sin of pride." And that was the last I saw of him, heard of him. And he was right. He was right. I'm very, very prideful. And, I will kill to get something done. I think it fits that vein of what we're talking about, favorite moment, least favorite moment, is that we were doing at the Juilliard School, the Maria Callas master class. Fabulous lady, she just really straight and on top of everything. And, she had certain needs, no big deal. It wasn't like, a 10-page writer or anything like that. And I was always backstage with her. I was the only one allowed to be back there when she was out there. And one of the people working for me said, why does she get everything she wants? It was a woman, a young lady who said, I said, because she's the star. And she said, well. I said, let me explain something to you in case your parents haven't yet. You got a job, and the reason why we all have a job tonight is because that woman is occupying 3 or 9 square feet of stage space. Wherever she walks tonight is the most valuable acreage in your life. You got it? And that, I always think about it and reinforces the fact that the only reason why any of us are here is what's happening there. And it can be Cirque du Soleil, or it could just be Death of a Salesman and just Willie Loman on stage. That's why we're all here. Those are the fireworks. And if that ain't good enough for you, get the hell off the truck, because we need the room.
Let me see what else I got here. Tell me about travel and the family in theater.
Well, the interesting thing about travel, family, and the theater is that when I was a gypsy and got married, we had a baby, is that the family was tighter when we traveled from theater to theater. When I got like a semi-permanent, when I was at the Juilliard School, it was a permanent job. That's when things began to fall apart. Don't ask me why, I don't know. But that going from theater to theater, we'd pack up everything in 1957 Buick, the largest automobile you ever saw, and room for everybody.
Well, what about the family in the theater, though? What about the group of people that you work with on a show for a limited run, and at the end of the show, you got to say goodbye? What's that like?
The theater as family
Right.
is what, or any event as family.
Exactly.
Theater, circus, a rock show. That's part of the allure for me, the camaraderie. I really enjoyed even this little bit of group here that we're together. This is the most important part to me. You know, whoever happens to be watching this, fine, but I'm having a good time with you three guys. And the same thing is when you're doing an opera, when you're doing a play, when you're doing something in the Astrodome. It's just, this little army of friends, some who you've met for the first time, some who you'll never see again, probably.
How do you feel? How do you feel when you have to say goodbye? How do you feel when you've been with this?
When I
group
have
of
to say
people?
goodbye, I feel fine because, I don't want to sound crass, they will be replaced. Sometimes by the same people, sometimes totally different people. It'll be another cameraman, but it's a cameraman. It'll be another carpenter, but it's a carpenter. And you still have a common language. And I think that and that's what I like, is that commonality of that language and that purpose. Because once you get there on a stage set, a movie set, no one questions why you're there. Everybody knows. And you're expected to fulfill your reason for being there. And whatever reason that you took the job for, whether it be money, love, revenge, doesn't make any difference. You do it. And the other people feel the same way. Very democratic.
Tell me about, have you looked at technology from where it was when you first got into business to where it is now? Has it made things better? Has it made things worse?
Looking at technology, I'm probably the most analog guy you'll ever meet. I'm not even all that crazy about ballpoint pencils that retract. They're an abomination. But when you take a look at what the computer can do, what mechanics can do, you'd be some kind of fool not to marvel. Does it beat a sunset? No. But, it works. I think it is not all to my liking, but it's a democratic society, and whatever works for people.
If you could go back,
I'd go back in a heartbeat.
if you could go back, where would you go? Pick a show or pick a time. Where would you go?
If I could go back.
And then why? Why would you go back?
If I could go back, is that my cell phone?
Not mine. Could be.
Can I turn it off?
Or you can answer it. Could be a job.
Nah, the hell with them.
You sure?
Yeah.
Okay.
If I could go back, pick a day or pick an event.
Pick a time. Pick a place.
I like the question, and I'm going to give you an answer using an example from Thornton Wilder's Our Town, when Emily has died. She's in the graveyard, and they say, she says she wants to go back for just one day, pick a day. And she does, and she goes back. And it's not the same, and she's sorry she's back. And that's what I, fear. I'd love to go back to many, many different days. And I'm thinking I'm going to be saddened and be sad that I went back.
If you could go back and if things were the way they were, nothing's changed, where would you go?
I think it would be at the very beginning almost, when I started working in professional theater. And, and part of the reason is that I was totally unencumbered as a human. I had no wife, no child, no girlfriend, a used car, and all I had was the work and the guys that I worked with. It was very, very free. I was still living at home. My mother made sure I had food and Clothes were washed. It was easy.
What about in the biz? What would you do? Where would you go?
Probably Juilliard. You know, just because of the people. There were just so many people because, you know, you had the dance division, Mr. Balanchine, you had the opera division, you had the music division, you had the drama division, you know, and you just, all these people, you know, you'd ride in the elevator with Lee Ullman, Maron, you know, and you'd see all these people, and some of them would, you know, call you by your first name, Itzhak Perlman, you know, Isaac Stern.
The family.
Yeah.
The family.
you
Well,
know.
what was it like? You must have been heartbroken when you left there. Or it must have been a transition that was difficult.
It was extremely difficult, but I was also going off to do the Winter Olympics, you know, so it took a while before all that settled in, you know.
Anything else that you want to comment on that we haven't talked about?
Comment. Yeah, why don't we talk about when the Juilliard School took an opera to the Festival of Two Worlds that Giancarlo Menotti had done until he passed. And we were loading up the opera into the sea containers, scenery, costumes, and some of the larger musical instruments. And they made it a very pointed, it was very pointed that they said, do not have anything in there that you don't want your mama to find. Nothing. It was quite clear what they were talking about, you know. So we loaded up everything, and the customs guy comes and he puts the customs seal on it, date and all this other business. And I think I had to sign some kind of manifesto. And off it goes. By truck to Port Elizabeth to Rotterdam, Rotterdam by rail, and then by truck up to Spoleto, into the theater. Now we're in the theater. The guy comes and he cuts all the little locking mechanisms, and I sign again that indeed nothing was tampered with on the outside. And they do a very, very thorough check of everything. I was quite amazed, very impressed. It slowed everything down. I mean, we lost a day. But they found some medicinal falderall. And, of course, it was in, I believe, a cello case, because a violin case wouldn't have been shipped. And the case was shipped empty because they didn't want to, you know, so, and I never did figure that one out, so whatever. It wasn't much stuff. And, of course, it had a name attached to the cello case, and they found, there were two young men, and they missed the opera, and they didn't do the return trip with us. And they were guests of the state, so to speak.
And the moral of the story is?
Well, the moral of the story is it's very tough. I don't think there is a moral there. I would like to expound on Giancarlo, if I may, because you'll get a kick out of it. And the guys will get a kick out of it. We were doing Antony and Cleopatra. It was a big hit. It's the opera that opened the Met, and it was a bomb at the Met. Franco Zeffirelli and all that business. And we were over budget. I put a budget together, and Giancarlo kept cutting things, and I'm just taking everything off. Now we're in rehearsal, and Giancarlo comes up to me. We're doing the Senate scene, and he says, Joe. I said, what, Giancarlo? He says, my wall. I'm going to need my wall. I said, Giancarlo, you cut it. He says, you, now it's personal, you no give me my wall? I said, no, Giancarlo, you cut it. You remember we were in Dr. Menon's office, you cut the wall. And we've already added some things back for you. Joe, you no give me my wall. I said, we can't, it's not in the budget. And he turns around and he starts walking up the aisle, and the stage manager, Lee Schlossberg, is there. He says, Lee, you tell Joe I'm going to go home, Scotland, and when I get my wall back, I'm going to come back. Out he goes. Out he goes. Of course, I knew he was staying with a friend on East 64th Street, so he wasn't going to get out of town real quick. So, needless to say, he got his wall back, and he came back from wherever he went.
The Italian guy that lives in Scotland, I love it.
No, he was.
You give him that
It
wall.
was all for the single mall.
We're done.
So
Thank-
wait, one more question. What's the funniest story that you know? You know, something that's just beyond it all.
I don't know. Well, I mean, I don't know if it strike anybody all that funny. I mean, we all had a good laugh when we were doing La Boheme, and Michael Kokianis was the director. And do you know who that is? He, I think he directed Never on Sunday and things like that, and a very, very good friend of Ari and Madame Callis. And when we were rehearsing and doing La Boheme is when Madame Callis was doing her master class. And so we had to strike the set for Boheme, and then we had to put it back up. And so we did the master class, and they had a double cast. So the two Mimis attended Madame Callis's master class. And she began giving them pointers on how to play Mimi. And, of course, Mr. Kokianis is in the audience, getting steamed and steamed and steamed. One of our Rudolphos was an Italian tenor from the old country. Nice guy, good enough singer, not the smartest guy on the planet. Master class is over. We're setting up Boheme, Act 1 or whatever. And Michael Kokianis comes back, just steamed, livid. And the Italian tenor, Michael, where you been? In the lobby. Two Greek gods meet. Mr. Kokianis, Madame Callis. Greek gods, thunder, lightning. Oh, Michael, you should have been there. And he's looking at him, and he's just mad. And then he couldn't help it. Just couldn't help it. He began to laugh with him, But the theater was sold out, 900 some odd people, and these two are screaming obscenities to each other in Greek, And of course, no one leaves. They're just, they're all trying to get closer. And these two, they could have cared less. But when he came back, Michael, Greek gods, thunder, lightning.
You good?
Terrific. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.